going on, guys? It is the Coaster Battleman here. It has been a very, very long time since I made an actual list of roller coasters that I've ridden at a certain amusement park, and this time it's Kings Island. I recently went there this year, and it's the major roller coasters. They're ranked from worst to best. Let's get started. Number 11 is Flight of Fear. This is the Premier Rides Spaghetti Bowl coaster at Kings Island. It has a pretty solid launch, and then after that, it's kind of mediocre, in my opinion. I'm not really the biggest Flight of Fear fan. My cousin is, and he'll be very sad that it's this low on the list for me. But I do see why people really like this ride. It's really exciting. It's in the dark. You have plenty of inversions all over the place, tight turns. Like, the layout is there, even though it is a clone, but I'm not really that big of a fan of this ride. It's a little bit jerky, and it's not really my kind of ride. 10th is in Vertigo. This is a Vekoma in Vertigo model, and it's a pretty decent coaster. It's a little bit better than Flight of Fear in my opinion. It is also a clone, but this ride is a pretty decent ride. If you brace yourself, this coaster is a pretty solid ride, but if you don't brace yourself, you're in for a party of head banging and neck banging and ear banging, and it's just really bad. So if you're riding in Vertigo, please brace yourself if you want a good ride. But overall, the layout is alright. It's a decently long ride, considering how short the track length is, because it goes forwards and backwards. Overall, not a bad ride. A solid filling coaster at Kings Island. Solid, like, role player, as you might say. Number 9 is Adventure Express, and I used to really overhype this coaster back a couple years ago, but now it's kind of fallen off for me. I'm not saying I dislike it more, but I do like this coaster. It's a solid ride. It has some really solid turns through the terrain. It has that final lift hill with the theming. Like, this is a solid mine train. My second favorite mine train, only behind a mine train at the mine train at Silver Dollar City, Thunderation, which is just an insane ride. But Adventure Express, overall, it's a really solid coaster. Good fit at Kings Island. A very nice family coaster. 8th is Racer, and this ride recently got a retrack, and I like it a lot more than I used to. The airtime is better, it's a smoother ride, and even though the trains are still the same, I really enjoy this coaster a lot more, especially when it's dueling and you have your friends or your cousins or your family members or whoever on the other side of the train. You're trash talking them on the lift hill. It's just such a fun experience. And overall, Racer's a really solid ride and a classic at Kings Island. 7th is the Bat, and this is a crazy aerodynamics suspended coaster. You have a crazy first drop along with a bunch of swooping turns throughout the ride. If I had to say one thing bad about this coaster, it is the duration, which is a little short. And I do have a cousin that says this is their favorite coaster at the park. Very crazy, but this is a pretty solid ride. I really enjoy this coaster. Definitely one of my favorite family coasters in the park, but not quite on the level of Backlot Stunt Coaster. Even though the Bat is more unique and it's not cloned on the Backlot Stunt Coaster, I prefer Backlot Stunt Coaster because it's a bit more intense. You got some really cool theming. I really enjoy the theming on this coaster. It's very interactive. You have the fire helicopter section, which is really cool. And then you have some indoor sections as well, and a very awesome final drop under the queue line. Overall, this is a really fun coaster, and the launch is very solid. 5th place is Banshee, and this is the start of Kings Island's Mega 5 Super Team, whatever you like to call it. Banshee is the worst of these elite coasters, but that's not saying it's a bad ride. This is a very solid B&M invert, though not my favorite invert. I would prefer a few over this, but this is still a very fantastic coaster. Very solid first drop, very solid inversions, It does have a bit of a rattle, especially the farther back in the train you are. But overall, Banshee is a very solid B&M invert, and I highly recommend to ride this in the front row or even the second row if you don't want to wait for the front row. Fourth place is Mystic Timbers, and this coaster has jumped a little bit in my rankings. Not really, because it was number 4 before, but I like this coaster more than I used to. It's a very solid GCI Woody. It has a pretty decent out and back layout with some pretty good ejector airtime. And if you hold the restraint up, along with having one of your hands up, you can get some really strong airtime on this coaster. And I did not do that before, but this new strategy from some of my friends, a few coaster enthusiasts, like they were telling me about this strategy, and the ride is even better than I remember it. The shed, I mean, it's okay, but overall, this ride isn't really about the shed. It's about the really exciting terrain style layout with the crazy ejector hills, and this is a pretty intense coaster as well. I really enjoy it. Third place is the newest coaster at Kings Island, Orion. I had high expectations going into this, a little bit loftier than what I thought with the ride. I really love this coaster, but unfortunately the duration is my only problem with this ride. Even though there is a bit of a rattle on this coaster already, like all the Kings Island B&Ms have this weird rattle, it never really bothered me. It's a really solid coaster. The drop is excellent. All the elements are really solid, and a good amount of them give you pretty decent airtime. And I love the color scheme and the theme of this coaster. The blue track, white supports is beautiful, stunning to look at, and this coaster is a very iconic ride to the skyline of Kings Island. I really have a lot of good things to say about this coaster, except for that duration. If this coaster was a bit longer, this would be the best coaster at Kings Island. But unfortunately, it is not. Two more are a bit better. Second place is the Beast. This is the longest wooden roller coaster in the world, and it's one of my favorite wooden roller coasters ever. And I do prefer this over the Voyage, which will probably trigger quite a few enthusiasts. But overall, the Beast is a really cool ride. It's an adventure through the terrain, the trees. This coaster goes 65 miles per hour, and it has a really awesome second half with that very shallow drop, only 18 degrees, and that crazy double helix through the tunnel. So overall, the Beast is just an epic ride. It's an awesome, most excellent adventure through trees and the woods, and it's an instant classic at Kings Island. But first place for me is Diamondback, and this is the B&M Hyper Coaster. This is a top 10 coaster I've ever ridden. It's in that number 10 spot for me. This coaster is an airtime machine. The floater airtime is fantastic, and this is my kind of ride. I love B&M Hypers and Gigas, especially with lots of airtime like this one. Diamondback is an excellent coaster. Even though there is kind of minimal theming, it doesn't really matter. This coaster has excellent airtime, a super long ride, and a really cool water splashdown. So that was my list, top coasters at Kings Island. This is the major coasters list. Next, I could do either Holiday World or Silver Dollar City, two new parks I visited in 2020 and 2021. And yeah, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos.